Let the sense commence.
Let the sense commence.
I'm Richard Hatcher.
Mick Waters.
And we're going to talk about the 2025 Australian federal election, which will be held on or before the 17th of May.
That's right, yeah, soon. So welcome back, listeners. For some of our international listeners, which we have some.
We have one listener in Indonesia.
Some in America.
Selamat pagi.
We've decided to come back to where we came from, Australia, and talk about federal politics. So yes, we will have an election in Australia, which means Australia's federal parliament, House of Reps, and some of the Senate is up for election. So let's give a bit of state of play for our listeners at home. So just as you said, Rich, we need to have an election by May the 17th. The Constitution tells us that there needs to be an election every 3 years. So we're coming up to that time. So who are our characters in this story? We've got Labor versus Liberal. That's how it's always been in Australia. We've got Anthony Albanese, who's running the Labor Party, and we've got Peter Dutton, who, after the cavalcade of different Liberal leaders, was the last one to come in once Scott Morrison got pretty well wiped out.
Yeah, but the landscape is changing.
Yes.
And the Greens and the Teals and a bunch of micro parties, they're all in the fray.
Super important, and I think this election, maybe they're going to be the most important than they've been for a while. So Australia is used to, so the Australian House of Representatives has 150 seats, so you've got to win 76 seats to be the majority, and that's how our democracy works. If you've got 76 seats, you form government. So the party that forms the 76 seats, or the coalition being the two or multiple parties, being Liberals and Nationals and country parties, they form together. So whoever gets the most seats wins. Now, that sounds like a very simplistic thing to say, but it is incredibly important to remember that unless you get 76 seats,
there's no party.
There's no party. There's no government. You're just almost there. So the ALP's got 78. So they're pretty close. They've got a pretty slim margin. They've got a margin of 2. So their strategy is don't lose too many seats. And if they can, try to pick up some seats. So they're going to be targeting some seats from their frenemies, the Greens, but there's also some other seats they're going to target. Now, Peter Dutton's coalition has a far bigger task. They've only got 57 seats. So they need to win 19 seats to be a majority. And so that's going to be a hard task. The Greens have got 4 and the Independents, and we call them Teals, have got 11. So the Greens strategy is try to pick up some seats, but really sit there quietly. And if it gets to the point of minority government, for anyone playing at home, a minority government means if you don't make your 76 seats, there's a fair bit of horse trading and negotiating and say, okay, let's make a coalition of sorts. So the coalition is an official coalition. It's written that they will generally band together, almost always band together, sometimes not. If we don't get 76 seats, then we get to the point where we need to have another coalition of minority parties making up the 76.
Yeah. So lots going on there, Mick. So I'm curious. I want to get into a few things. I want to look at polls. I want to know how are we trending. And obviously, we saw a pretty sizable surge to the right in the US. Are we expecting the same thing here? Are we going to make Australia great again? What's going to happen?
That's a great question. So let's get to the Liberal strategy, and they are really tapping into this Trump vibe, and it may work for them, it may not work for them. So their strategy is let's get Australia back on track, which sounds a lot like let's make America great again.
What's behind it? What do you think they're selling?
Well,
is the policy platform markedly different to any other election in recent times? I mean, this is what I'm thinking when I'm thinking Liberals. I'm thinking low tax, drill baby drill.
Yeah.
Let's cut down on the welfare, cut down on education, hospitals, all that stuff.
It always comes down to Labor will have generally a progressive platform, and the Liberals will have a regressive platform. So what that means is Labor is always forward-looking and the Liberals are generally backwards-looking. And you just listen to their slogan. So the Liberals are saying, let's get Australia back on track. So it's harking back to something nostalgic, a time where Australia was on track, whereas Labor's saying, building Australia's future. So as remember, Julia Gillard used to say, looking forward, and the others were looking backwards. So it's come down to that. So the Liberals are talking about they want to go back to a time where there was less tax, where inflation was lower, where there were less public servants, where
in their
housing
defense,
was easier to get, and people were easier to get a house.
But in their defense, they're probably thinking that's the future. Lower taxes are the future. Pulling up more fossil fuels and minerals from the ground and selling them at very low tax rates. That's the future.
I mean, it's cute. It's
Jobs,
a version,
jobs and growth, mate.
It's a version of the future, sure. So how they want to get there. So you would have heard nuclear is a big thing. So the Liberals, as you probably already know, aren't a huge fan of renewables. So the energy is a big dichotomy. So Labor's all for renewables, net zero by 2050. Liberals are talking about nuclear energy. Now, nuclear energy in Australia is never going to happen. There's no future in our lifetimes or our children's lifetimes where nuclear power is going to control the energy mix in Australia. Everyone
It depends
needs
who you
to
talk
admit that.
to. It depends who you talk to, Mick. I mean, like, we work for a renewable energy company. We believe in renewables. But if you talk to Bill Gates, he's saying we might be on the cusp of some technical innovations. We might have these.
But they've been saying that for a long time, and they've been trying to build a nuclear plant in England, and I forget the name of it, but it's billions and billions and billions
Massively over budget.
Over budget.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
no one can build nuclear fast. No one can build nuclear cheap. So what Australia needs is to roll out in the energy mix is something that is that we've already done it. So it's either more coal or more gas or renewables, right? Nuclear, it's not even in the...
Yeah, old school,
not even in the futures.
nuclear reactors, no one can argue that they're financially viable. They're not. It would need to be a new type of nuclear reactor.
But to roll out any sort of technology, you need standards, you need people trained. Currently, nuclear energy is illegal in Australia, so you've got to change legislation. You've got to find a place to house these things. You've got to find a place to dump the waste. So, look, I'm fairly agnostic on the energy mix. I do think renewables are far better than nuclear. However, I don't see any future with nuclear. And I also believe that this is the Liberal strategy. They also don't think there's a future, but it can buy them time. So obviously, the Liberals have very deep friends in the resource community. Gina Rinehart, great friend.
Second biggest Liberal donor.
Great friend. Peter Dutton
went to
was
a
at a birthday party recently. Guy Sebastian was singing.
We just had a tech issue. And we're
Yes,
back.
coming back to you from Gina Rinehart's birthday party. Neither Rich and I could attend. It was a long way away in WA and we weren't invited. But picking it back up, we were talking about the difference in energy policy between the parties. So the Liberal Party's story goes deep into resources. Gina Rinehart's a big friend of the Liberal Party, and I believe that that's where the nuclear energy policy has its backing in. One, it buys them time to continue oil and gas and coal, but also you can dig up uranium. So any mining fleet that can't be used for coal
we got
or
loads of
rare earth
uranium.
minerals, they can go and dig up uranium. So we're not drill baby drill, but we're dig baby dig. So it aligns with them. So nuclear, in my mind, is a complete furphy. There is no future, an Australian future, where there's going to be a complete energy mix reliant on nuclear, but it's buying time. It's buying them, and there's been, even the best estimates are, it'll be 2040, 2050 before there's even one of these built. But you've got to find out where they're going to be built, energy, store the waste, who wants these in your community. You've got to change the transmission lines, whole lot of stuff. So it's not a unplug the fridge and plug in a nuclear fridge. Doesn't work like that.
I'm not sure how much of the nuclear conversation we lost in the cut there, but I mean, you could just build one where Loy Yang is, but I understand and we agree that the standard nuclear reactor type is an expensive form of new energy.
But it's a gimmick, right? But it's a gimmick, right? So if the market wanted nuclear energy, the market would have delivered it already.
Well, we agree.
We're going back to
that
some
it's
sort
not
of
cost effective.
We're going back to some sort of communism style government where they've decided against the market to build something that's going to cost billions of dollars that nobody wants.
If LNP gets elected and then creates huge incentives for nuclear, then yeah, of course, that's what would happen. But
it's a very odd one, and it goes against their belief, which is small government. Government doesn't intervene. It's very hypocritical and counterintuitive to say they want to cut spending, but then they're going to spend billions of dollars on nuclear energy, which is a real furphy.
Yeah, but this is another prime example of do as I say, not what I do. Like the Liberal Party, Liberal National Party, they've always been very interventionist.
True, that's a really good point. They have been interventionists because, and especially the Nationals, where they talk about wanting to be small government. And I think this is really important to talk about in the Liberals and the Coalition, is the Malcolm Turnbull type Liberals, the small R Liberals or the Wets, don't exist in the majority anymore. They were killed. Tony Abbott killed them, Scott Morrison killed them, Peter Dutton's finished them off. And interestingly, the people who were centre-right lost their seats and the Teals took their seats. So the Teals, as we were talking about the independents, critically important. So what we're looking at is a very conservative party with very conservative views. Now, conservative parties tend to go back around the other side of the circle and they tend to be a bit more communist or fascist or something where it's more about command and control rather than saying free market, let the market decide. These guys become more protectionist. So building a nuclear power station is completely protectionist and it has nothing to do with free market policies.
I'm with you, Mick. No one wants it.
Well, Peter Dutton wants it, but it's just to buy time. It's an old magician's trick. That's what I think anyway.
All right.
So we also want to talk about cost of living. So cost of living is really probably the second or first key policy and big policy differences. So both parties obviously want to say, we want to make it easier for people, but each party has a different view of who people are. So the Labor's policies is about housing, trying to get people into housing. They had some money to help people pay their power bills, whereas the Liberals want to help people by firing them if they have a government job. They want to bring in the Doge. We covered Elon's Doge. They've already brought in a SMOD, which is the Shadow Minister of Government Efficiency, who's Jacinta Price, who was very, very effective in the No campaign, is now the Shadow Minister for Government Efficiency. So she's the SMOD. So again, same sort of topic, very, very different approach. Liberals want to bring prices down by cutting government spending, which means firing people, which is complete madness because you're relying on people voting against their own self-interest by understanding that if you vote for this party, you're going to lose your job. Now, things like that did work in America, though.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say they've worked. I think it's a little bit early to say, and I think work for who? So let's talk about bringing prices down for who, right?
Yeah.
So you have your Department of Government Efficiency, you fire a bunch of people, you reduce a bunch of government services, but overwhelmingly, these government services help poor people. So the people with boatloads in the bank, they're not suffering greatly due to price increases.
No, they
consumer
aren't.
Goods.
They
right?
aren't, but unfortunately, as we've seen time and time again, some people in this bracket tend to vote against their self-interest and they get tricked with big slogans, and that's where this nostalgic, let's get Australia back on track. Let's make America great again. It actually doesn't mean anything, but it's an emotional trick to say what's happening now is not good, but it could be better. And your life could be easier. You just need to vote for me.
Yeah, look, it worked in the States.
It worked in the States. So we've covered energy, we've covered cost of living, the economy, of course. Liberal Party's plan to boost the economy is to boost mining and resources. Not surprising.
Peter Dutton said openly when he was asked about visiting Gina Reinhardt and his relationship with her, he said, we love mining, we're gonna drill baby drill, and we're gonna take care of you guys, the miners, and we hope that you take care of us. Open corruption.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of back scratching. Is it corruption? Not sure. It smells like it though. At the end again, the Labor Party wants to do the same sort of thing. If they're as overt, I'm not sure. So they're made in Australia campaign. They want to talk about Australian steel, energy, all sorts of Australian industries, heavily renewable energy. So, I mean, they're also trying to prop up Australian industries, which is good. So, right, so they're the major parties. Rich, what about the Greens and the Teals? What's their vibe?
I'm going to get right in there.
Yeah.
So, I've just been poking around the Greens website, looking at what's their pitch for the current election, and it's not going to be new to a lot of people. I will give them props. They have a pretty clean website and a pretty powerful message. What do the Australian Greens believe? What aims and goals are we collectively fighting for? Our shared beliefs and the outcomes the Greens are fighting for are outlined here. They've got a charter and constitution and their 4 pillars. So when we flick through, I mean, their pillars are pretty much, what do we got? It's based on ecology, democracy, social justice, peace, an ecologically sustainable economy, meaningful work, global responsibility.
They had some taxation policies I was reading.
They were going to get to them.
They wanted to go after corporate tax avoidance, billionaire tax avoidance.
This is it. Greens policies, election platform. In a wealthy country like Australia, we should have world-class public health, education and affordable housing. We have the resources to make it happen, but only if we choose to act. Under both major parties, you're paying too much. This is straight from the Greens website. While 1 in 3 big corporations pay no tax, our plan takes on the big corporations and makes them pay their fair share. We'd use it to fund world-class public health and education and genuinely tackle the housing, climate and environment crisis. I'll throw in Richard's 2 cents on that. So that, that's a powerful message. It's pretty succinct.
Yeah.
And you can get behind that. Like, what? 1 in 3 big corporations aren't paying tax and I'm paying all this income tax? That's wrong. That gets me riled up, Mick, I'll be honest. And
it's smart. It's a smart move as well, because the Greens in the past have been attacked for being all ideas and no way to govern. So for them to have the first question is, well, how are you going to pay for it? And they say, tax billionaires.
Yeah, that's number 1 on their plan here. So they've got a plan here with about 15 dot points. Number 1, tax billionaires and big corporations, reduce inequality and fund the things we all need. Healthcare for all.
Yeah.
50-cent public transport fares. Wipe out student debt. Real climate action.
Yeah,
I mean,
net
these are all
zero.
catchphrases. Now, I'd be a little bit critical of some of these things as to when the rubber hits the road, what does it actually look like?
Yes.
But in my mind, they're saying all the right things.
Yeah, and look, it is what the Greens usually say. This time around, I would say they're more disciplined by they've got a plan to fund it. So that works for them so that people can take them a bit more seriously. So what about our collection of independents? A lot of them are women and a lot of them are ex-liberals. We wouldn't call them a party, but they're a gathering of sorts, and they do all have some of the same backers.
Yeah, that's a good one, Mick. I was trying to untangle this before. I haven't spent a lot of time on it, but we've all heard the idea of teal independence being thrown around. I didn't really have a firm conception of what that means, but what it actually means is just it's referring to various centrist, independent, or minor party politicians in Aussie politics who've been grouped together collectively for ease of discussion by the media in Australia. So, are you teal? Are you not teal? It doesn't matter terribly. What matters is we're talking about an increasingly powerful cohort of independent, mostly centrist, centre-left, centre-right independents, sometimes agreeing on climate change, some of whom have been backed by some big money organisations such as, I say big money, perhaps medium money when you compare to Gina Rinehart and Rupert Murdoch. Climate 200, which is a funding organisation that exists, that was founded by Simon Holmes a Court, who's a trust fund guy. His father was Australia's first billionaire, and he is passionate about climate change, and this organisation, Climate 200, will fund candidates who are running against Liberal Labor candidates who have a strong focus on climate action. That's what that's all about. And yeah, the Climate 200 organisation, they are backing 35 independents in the upcoming election. So that's very interesting. And what does it tell you? Money wins elections, Mick.
Money talks, yeah. And Australia is every election costs money. Australia is no island when it comes to this. It's not as prevalent as America, where elections cost a lot more and they have their expensive primaries, and every single person, every single major public servant needs to have an election. But money still talks in Australia. So that's our intro, that's our parties. Let's have a chat about polls.
Yep, I want to know about it. You've been getting your nose right into the polls, Mick. What's it looking like? Because at a glance, looking at who has the seats as you ran through in the introduction.
Yeah.
I'll make sure we're still recording, and we are. It looks like Labor looks super comfortable, super safe. How could they possibly see a swing?
Yeah, and this is it. And the elections are a game of numbers, so you can get a bit crazy. So all a poll is talking about is the vibe, which goes into what we call it our 2PP, so our two-party preference. So once you take your primary vote and you take your preference and you add them together, the person that gets the most out of 100 wins the 2PP, but that's not the end of the story. So you can win the 2PP and you can still lose the election. So that happens. What you need is the number of seats. So in the latest polls, so News Poll and some other polls, state-based polls, the Liberal Party is ahead. So they're ahead on 51%. So based on some analysis, that could turn into about a 3% swing.
Mick, I want to ask you a question on that, because I know things move together in the world oftentimes, and the political shift in the States is probably echoed to some degree in Australia. But tell me, how did we go in the space of 3 years from a comfortable Labor victory to now it's going to be looking the other way for the coalition? What in 3 years made people think that Peter Dutton and his mates would do a better job than Labor? Have Labor just performed so horribly?
I don't think they've performed. No, I don't think they've performed horribly.
Is it social media lurching to the right? What is it?
I think the couple factors are, one, we had, and a lot of these hand grenades, these bombs, these mines were left by the last government. So the big thing is cost of living. So people have been hurting. No doubt, you can't sugarcoat it. People have, as we covered before, their money is worth less. They buy less with their money. Groceries cost way more. Petrol costs more. Childcare costs more. People are really struggling to get by. The post-COVID drop in sentiment about how happy people are, it's gone down. So there's definitely that hangover that the Liberal Party didn't do enough, and they pushed a lot of this down the road. So interest rates going right up, that's really hurt Labor just because they were there. And they were going to hurt any government. There was always going to be protests against any government. The other thing we've had is obviously the election of Donald Trump. So as we've seen around the world, there is a shift to the right. We've seen this in European politics as well. People are saying, and I think they're right, is what has happened is the previous privileged class of people that look like you and I, men with some education, but often not a lot of education, are feeling like the world is leaving them behind, and people like women from diverse backgrounds, from non-hetero backgrounds, are getting more of the pie than they've had before, and there's some dissatisfaction in that. So those sort of things. So I don't think the Labor has done a terribly bad job. I mean, they definitely have had some clangers, but I don't think it's any worse than what a first-term party would have. I mean, some of the weaknesses that Labor is having to work through at the moment is that Victoria is a really bad spot for Labor at the moment. So the Victorian state government that Jacinta Allen leads and that Dan Andrews led is pretty unpopular in Victoria. Recently, a recent poll showed that they would lose the election in Victoria as well. And there was a massive, massive, massive swing in the Werribee by-election where they went down 16.7% in a swing. So that's bad. And if that happened across the country, Albo would lose dramatically. But I don't think it's likely to happen, though.
That's very bad. Is that down to, like, that's so puzzling, Mick, because Werribee, that's the working man's heartland. Like,
bingo. And it touches back on this dissatisfaction thing I was talking about. So centre-left parties and Democrats are guilty of the same, and European parties are guilty of the same. So what tends to happen is, as a party gets more educated, they tend to forget about their working class roots. It happens everywhere. The people say that they're from the workers, but they've never done any work. The Labor Party, the Labor MPs are all staffers and lawyers and union officials. They've never actually done any work. So they are not connected to the voters anymore. And the voters can be hoodwinked for a certain while, and then they go, hang on a second, we're getting left behind. Jobs are going overseas. Infrastructure is not being built. Housing is unaffordable. Crime is a big deal. And crime happens for all sorts of reasons. In Victoria, we've had bail law reforms going through at the moment. So Victoria is a weak area for the Labor Party, but then on the other side of the country, WA is going gangbusters. WA just won an election the other day. The Liberal Party was consigned to 5 seats.
Isn't it kind of crazy because WA is less urban than Victoria, and they've got all the mining,
and it's a petro state.
It's insane.
How
does that work?
It's insane, and it came down to
charismatic leadership. Mark McGowan.
Exactly, Mark McGowan. Probably the funniest video to come out of COVID was him talking about we're not saying you can't go for a jog and eat a kebab. I recommend anyone watches that right now. It was right up there with Dan's Get on the Beers track. But yes, Mark McGowan. So WA is very different. You know, they play a different game than us. They're a bit more like America, a bit more like Canada. They're more transactional. I think they're more objective. They think things are what they are. They don't read into them so much. That's what I think anyway. I've only been there like 2 times in my life. Margaret River has some very nice wine, so I could get right around that. But yeah, so Australia, and this is how it's so hard to pick what the heck is going to happen in this election. But let's talk about how it could go really badly for both parties. So let's start with the Liberal Party. So the WA election loss, they got smashed. Dutton was hoping to pick up some seats in WA. That makes things harder for him. up in Queensland, where Dutton is from, and Dutton was a police officer back in the day. They had just had massive flooding. Mr. Dutton thought it'd be a good idea to go to a Liberal Party fundraiser instead of staying home and helping out in the floods. We all remember Ruddy walking around with his pants rolled up, helping people out, which I think was totally legitimate. There'd be a lot of MPs filling sandbags for cameras, but that's always the criticism of people when they aren't around in natural disasters, and people remember those things. The other thing is Peter Dutton spent a lot of time manufacturing a hard man image. He was the border force guy, he was a police officer, he was the guy who was talking about war with China and African gangs running loose, and now he's had to do a re-image campaign where he trotted his wife out to say he's not a monster in front of the camera.
You kind of have to, if you look and behave how he behaves, you just have to do that.
That's right. So he's had to go through a re-image campaign. The Liberal Party is not popular with women, and they were very unpopular with women under Scott Morrison. So the question is, is Peter Dutton more or less likeable than Scott Morrison? That's what it comes down to.
That's a great question, and they're probably they'd be my top 10 most unlikable people that I can bring to mind at any moment.
I wouldn't invite them to my birthday party.
Yep.
Yeah. The other thing so we've mentioned Trump. Trump is not an Australian, but as we've covered in previous episodes, we are very much guided by America. And so you've got both parties trying to pitch themselves as being Trump whisperers. So Dutton saying, I could manage Trump, Albo saying, well, I am managing Trump. Neither party can manage Trump. Not even Trump can manage Trump because Trump's
going to Trump.
Trump is going to Trump. The only person Trump listens to is his mate, Vladimir Putin. So no one can do anything with Trump. Dutton has positioned himself as a sort of mini Trump, Timu Trump, as they've said. Now, Trump is very unpopular in the majority of Australia. So if he goes all in on saying, I'm Trump's guy, I'm the Trump whisperer, that may be bad for him. Albo is trying to play a bit more rational, but people do think that Dutton would be better for dealing with Trump. If that's a good thing or not, we're not sure.
They just slap each other on the back and say, drill, baby, drill. That's all that would occur there. Same as ScoMo and Trump.
Well, that's it. They would say that Gina's my mate. You know Gina. Gina wants to invest in America. A lot of these resource companies have far-reaching connections into Texas and those sort of places. So that's the Liberal Party. Now, the Liberal Party has got as I said, they've got a long way to go. They've got to win lots and lots and lots of seats. But the Labor, on the other hand, they only need to lose 2 seats and they're into minority government.
So there's a great chance we're going to be playing the minority game.
There is a great chance, and it's not the worst thing in the world. It's common in Europe to have minority coalition type governments. As we mentioned, it's a bad time to govern in Australia. Albo has also taken a few hits recently. He bought a Harbourside mansion. Now, in his defence, any sort of shack in Sydney is going to be worth $3.7 million anyway, but it wasn't a good look.
No.
The Battler from Balmain wasn't a good look.
Look, I don't like it, Mick. I mean, the average federal politician has like 2.6 houses, something like this. I just don't believe that when any federal politician talks about making houses more affordable that they truly mean it. Maybe some of the Greens, maybe some of the Independents, but I also believe, and this is a little plug from my own personal political perspective playbook, but I don't believe that any one of the 3 big parties are going to do anything meaningful when it comes to housing, because
Absolutely not. And one thing we need to come to is the Greens. When we talk about housing, the Greens cohort are a big blocker of housing development in inner cities. The Greens cohort are a big part of the NIMBYism that says, no, we don't want medium density, no, we don't want housing density. Greens have often voted against that because the people that support the Greens are often inner city wealthy people, and they don't want their nice Victorian townhouses or their on-street parking lost.
That's very
That is an
interesting.
unfortunate truth, an unsettling truth, but
I reckon the Greens party would be split on that. I reckon you'd have maybe some older Greens voters that would be more opposed to inner city development, and probably some young ones that would be more keen on it. I think it's an interesting topic, and I think it's a little bit of a grey area. I think green spaces in cities are really important, and I do think another thing which is never talked about is that we can't grow indefinitely. So we need to have a vision as to what's a sustainable size for a city, what's a sustainable number of people. We can't grow indefinitely.
We can unpack this definitely, but Australia needs to move to medium and high density like now.
Well, we've got a problem, particularly in Melbourne. It's the 25th largest city by land size, but in population size, it's way further down the list. So we have this city that's like spread like a massive pancake, and we have to use fossil fuels driving hours all over the place to get anywhere.
And
so it's really inefficient.
instead of getting train stations and tram stops and connections to major freeways and have them super high dense, and then out from that medium dense and then low density, we have low density, low density, low density, low density.
It's true.
Even in the inner suburbs, everyone still wants to have, car parks. And you look at a place like Japan or China or Europe, then they realise is that people want to live around train stations and centres. Why don't we give them high rises and they can get around it? We have that in the inner city of Melbourne, but that should spread out the whole corridors, but it doesn't. That's definitely another episode.
Yep.
So what it seems to be is it's going to come down to marginal seats. So we've got a lot of seats that are and when we talk marginal seats, we talk about seats that are sitting on, 0 point something, 1 point something, 2 point something. So if there was a swing of 3.1%, assuming it's national, and it never is, assuming it is, but it never is, that they would eat these things up. Now, elections are entertaining if you're a psychopath like me, because when it happens, and unfortunately Anthony Green won't be around, but Casey is going to be, and he's good, he's the apprentice. It's very, very interesting to watch what happens. And there's always a narrative on each area, be it a local issue, be it a personality issue, be it a state-based issue. And so it's very, very hard to pick an election on a national swing based on sentiment. But let's say it happens. Let's say there's a 3.1% swing or 3% swing. Then there's a lot of marginals that would get eaten up. So the ones that everyone is watching, we've got seats like... So we've got Deakin in Victoria that's held by the Liberals, that's on 0.02%, 375 votes there.
Anyone's seat.
We've got Menzies in Victoria, 0.42. Bennelong, Gilmore, Wentworth, who's held by an independent, is on 0.58, and others all around the country. So this is going to be an election based on the margins.
Yeah.
And so the swing happens, and very, very quickly, within the first half an hour of the election, I think that it will be very clear what's going to happen. So if you just start seeing seats changing hand, gobble, 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 well, Labor only needs to lose 2 seats, and then they're already in minority government. And then it becomes, and then our friends, the Teals and the Greens, are sitting there. Well, less so the Teals, because the Teals are not a party of sorts, but
they've been accused of it by the coalition.
They definitely have been accused, and they're not silly. In fact, they're some of the smartest female politicians in the country. So they would be sitting down and they would be saying, "Hey, what do you reckon if this goes this way?" And some have already admitted that they would go to the coalition. What?
They're not all female, but carry on.
A lot of them are. I mean, the impressive ones are.
Don't be so cruel to your own kind, Mick.
In the last few elections, a female independent has been one of the most effective
Sally Stegel.
Sally Stegel, we've got Allegra, Spender. We've got...
What about the blokes? What about Peter George, Ben Smith? No, you're right. They are overwhelmingly
they're
women.
mostly ladies and highly educated. So who else have we got? We've got also we've got Bridget Archer down in Tasmania. She's marginal. She's a Liberal. She's also very good. Who else have we got?
But we may be getting into the weeds a little
We're getting into the weeds, and we'll come back to this. So what it's going to come down to is one, and I think it's going to come down to sentiment. Who do people want to run the country? Less about the policies, less about this or that. People are going to probably, and people are so bored and dissatisfied with the whole thing, they'll go, oh my God, have I got to vote again? They'll drag themselves out, they'll get in the booth and they'll go, who do I dislike less? And that's what it'll come down to.
Yeah.
And those votes, once they're all tallied up, they'll go to a swing and then seats will change hand. And the Liberals have still got to get 19 seats. I don't think they're going to get there. I think their pathway to victory is they pick up some seats, Labor loses enough seats, and then it's just a complete shit show because Albo's running around trying to get the numbers. I think he'll get the numbers easier than Dutton. Dutton, whilst he's gone through a reimagination campaign, I don't think would make friends easily.
You don't have to try too hard to be more likeable than Peter Dutton.
No, you don't. And he's cultivated this hard man image for so long, and people are not silly. They'll remember. The stop the boats vibe, all of that sort of stuff. Is that what you want as the leader of your country? And so I don't think there's much more to say. I think this whole episode was just about giving everyone an intro and where we think this election's going to go. We'll come back, we'll do some more elections on the parties, on some more tighter issues.
We will. And I've got one final question for you. What percentage of the Australian electorate do you think reads through political parties' policy platforms or even a summary of their platforms, even for the top 3 political parties in Australia, prior to voting? 1%? Less?
How many? I would say 10.
10%.
I would say 10%. But the more important statistic when I used to work in elections is 25% of people that vote don't know how they're going to vote when they walk into the booth. And elections are always won on the 10% in the middle. You get your people, you carve it up, and it'll be, because Australian elections flitter between 48, 52, 49, 51. Yeah. So the middle, the swinging voter is the key. And the swinging voter will go into there and the media will be running hard. And it'll be, who do I dislike the least?
Excellent.
And that's it.
Thanks for the primer, Mick.
Welcome back to Australia. Let's get back to where we came from and let's talk through this election.
Till next time.
Tune in next time. See you guys.